non-traditional ways. And by non-traditional, when we're thinking of traditional meetings, we're thinking of weekly meetings, all in person, generally in the same place. So thinking of ways that that might be done a little bit differently by some of the clubs we have here tonight. And they're also going to be sharing some of their wisdom, insight, and experience, both in what they've done so far and in some of their experimentation. Following that, we'll have a Q&A session where we'll have questions which can be asked either through our chat function in Zoom or through the Facebook Live panel. And so from that, we'll have a bit of a chance to have a bit of a talk, have a bit of a chat about these things and find out what will work best for us. Now, from this, we are going to have a little bit of a survey at the end. We have a survey with one question, just one question, very simple, and that is, did you enjoy the event? Yes or no? Now, a lot of these surveys are a little bit of a pain. We'd like you very much to go through that if you have a chance, because it will help us improve these things in future. And there is room for optional comments as well. And the last thing, we have a lot of people here from a lot of different places tonight. We were just talking before we kicked off on some of the places that everyone has come from, and it's brilliant to see so many people here. So if you're joining us on Zoom tonight, one thing that might be worth doing, just when you're in Zoom, go through and just set your name on Zoom to have both your personal name and also which Rotary Club you come from. And that gives us all a little bit of an idea of just how wide our audience is for the evening. And so, yeah, we'll get going with this and we'll kick off for tonight and see how this all goes. We aren't going to be focusing too much on the tech of online meetings. We may answer some questions if things get a little bit into there. And this may give us a good chance for follow-up for some other things as well. So right now we have 41 people who are joining us between both Zoom and Facebook Live. So again, welcome to everyone. And hopefully from tonight, you'll feel that you have a little bit more of an idea of what is possible in terms of Rotary meetings and have a little bit of encouragement to go out there and experiment with what is possible. So to kick things off, our President Madhu would like to say a quick few words. So I'll pass over to her. Madhu.
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, everyone. Welcome from District 9800 and neighboring districts from 9800 to our Ethics Forum meeting. And this is the second one. So we started one in the month of May, and this is the second one. So thank you very much for being present tonight. And I am looking forward to hearing from our esteemed speakers. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Madhu, for your kind words. And so we'll kick this off with our first panelist, who is Peter Frew. And I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. I don't entirely know. And so Peter is coming to us as the co-chair of the Regional Structure Pilot Program and is also a past district governor of District 9800. And he's a panelist who came highly recommended to me by a lot of people. And so we're very fortunate to have him here this evening. So I'll hand over to Peter and we can begin.
Thanks, Stephen. And, you know, I'll keep my comments brief. In fact, I might leave the regional pilot work until after the main body, just for that bit, so we've got plenty of time for the main reason people are here. Our district is quite well engaged online. I'm just giving you a summary now. 64 of our 65 clubs are meeting, and the other club is looking forward to resuming face-to-face. Most of the clubs have found a high level of engagement going online, perhaps surprising to some people, but typically getting more participants along than were attending their weekly meeting. And of course, as I'm sure it'll emerge during, there's been many positives about this because also speakers could be from anywhere. They can link in projects, people are reconnecting with youth exchange students. And of course, there are many non-traditional clubs that have emerged over time, which will be represented here. My own club is a traditional club, but we're a club of 49 members and we're getting 35 to 40 attending every weekly meeting. And my only tip is if you've got a bigger group, have breakout rooms. We have them at the start and the end of the meeting. And that allows the people to participate in groups of 5 or 6 rather than in the 30 to 35 where it becomes a bit one way as tonight will be. So breakout rooms are a great thing. They're easy to do. And I highly recommend it. you know, clubs that haven't tried that start doing that. I think the other thing is to bear in mind is that, you know, things weren't perfect before COVID-19, and we should remember that 1 in 7 Rotarians are leaving clubs every year. And why they leave is through a lack of engagement and because of cost and time. And most people join Rotary, well, the large majority of people join Rotary to make a difference and be involved in community-based projects, either locally or internationally. They don't really join for the meeting. And we need to keep that in mind. And in Australia, at least, long lunches disappeared 2 decades ago, business lunches. And I'm thinking that dinner meetings in particular are probably going to go the same way. And we need to be proactive that where we do meet, we meet for the right reasons. And there is still a role for a face-to-face for those who can manage it, depending on the nature of their club. But we really should be taking the positives out of the online experience. Most of clubs like mine, who are traditional clubs, would not have been able to go online if they weren't forced to. And it's with a lot of effort to bring a lot of members along the way. So that's an important journey for everybody. So look, I might just leave it at that and leave other speakers who have other things to offer. But I'm certainly like, if I get a chance at the end to give a couple of minutes update on the regional pilot project, which we're running across Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific at the moment. We've got a survey open at the moment on that, and we've had nearly 500 people respond to that. So I'd like to give you a bit of a heads up on that at the end if I can.
Absolutely. And so thank you very much, Peter. And there were some really interesting points you made there. A lot about the fact that everything was kind of, we were all pushed into this situation a little bit, but we're taking the positives out of it. And that statistic, particularly about, what was it, 1 in 7 Rotarians leaving their clubs per year, that's a really remarkable number. And I guess one of those points about driving engagement, and again, about the fact that Rotarians are people of action, not people of meetings. So really, really important, and thank you very much for that. So we'll kick off now with Leanne Trin, if she's online. I haven't seen yet. Yes, there she is. And so Leanne's coming to us from a newer Rotary Club, the Rotary Club of Northside, who we're currently in the process of forming, and they're experimenting and bringing different things to the plate that clubs might not normally consider. You may also know her as the project manager of Trachoma 2020. So I will pass over to Leanne, and thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Hi, Stephen. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I'm really glad to be able to join your meeting and see how you guys operate. As Stephen mentioned, I am in the process of putting together the provisional club of Rotary Northside. And Rotary Northside came about because I was introduced to Rotary about 7 years ago as a global grant scholar. I was the beneficiary of Rotary's District 9800's inaugural global grant scholarship, and was able to use that to study in London. And through that scholarship, I learned a lot about Rotary as an organisation. I didn't know much beforehand, but I was able to learn so much about what Rotary is capable of, and meet a lot of different types of clubs through being a scholar, but also through this project, this national project, Trachoma by 2020. And obviously was invited to join many different types of clubs, including receiving an invitation from Gabe. Thanks, Gabe, for the E-Club. But in my heart, I saw that there was a deficit in the type of people that I often engage with, which are the Generation X, Y, the millennials, and I felt that I could add the most value to Rotary by working on engaging this group of people, and that's how Rotary Northside ended up coming about. And in a lot of discussions with the people who are part of Rotary Northside, we know that in order for us to be a successful club, we needed to have a club which is not that different to having any successful enterprise. It needed to be human-centered, it needed to be person-centered. We needed to make sure that we were responding appropriately and offering something that was appropriate to people in our demographic. Now, I'm a parent of 2 young children. Many of us are parents to children, young children, but many of us also aren't parents at all and have very successful working lives. We wanted our club to have a really strong engagement. We wanted to have the right people, and I guess I'm unapologetic about having the right people in a club. I know that there are many clubs which have experienced failure, I guess, because of people in the club hindering progress, and that's definitely something that we are really aware of. We're not a club that is just open to everyone, and I think that sort of frustrated a number of Rotarians who've been watching the process of our evolution, but we've been very clear about ensuring that the people who intend to join our club understand what our vision is and what our values are. And so we've spent a lot of time developing our vision and values. Our vision, of course, is to make the world the place that we want it to be, that we want to live in, that we're proud of. And our values, we developed 5 values. So the first value was that there would be happiness and fun, and that we were coming together to make the world a better place, but we never forget that we do this to enjoy ourselves and each other's company as well. And we want to create genuine happiness for every member of the group. Our second value was authenticity, that we were open and honest with each other, and also with external stakeholders as well. We don't let issues brew or go instead, and we really want to steer clear of politics within our club. We want to ensure that concerns can be raised respectfully and constructively as well. And so we're clear that we don't do pomp and ceremony, but that we're humble. Our third value is that we have compassion and care, and that we're motivated by compassion to make the world a better place. Our fourth value, reciprocity. We ensure that we all commit to each other and to the club. And finally, that our fifth value is that we're outcome driven. So not that only that we're people of action, but we ensure that we don't get bogged down in red tape and procedure, but that we're not duplicating work, that what we do actually provides genuine benefit. And that is a really important value to the people in my demographic. We're all working individuals. A lot of the individuals in our club are quite high level, directors of companies, researchers in really strong fields, PhD holders, a very strong bunch of people who I guess need a really good reason to be part of a club like Rotary, be part of an organisation like Rotary. I think there's a lot to be said about Rotary and the capability that Rotary has to create change in the world. And in order to engage members like this, we really need to appeal to those members, but in a way that suits them. And that's the whole point of Rotary Northside. We're still very much in development. We're still in evolution. We haven't chartered yet. We are getting close to the numbers needed to charter. But as I said, we're looking for members who will stay with us for the long term. And yeah, that's where we're at the moment.
Well, I nearly lost my audio there. Let me just make sure everything's working. Brilliant. So yeah, look, thank you very much for that. That's a fantastic thing to hear. And I think there's a lot to be said for designing a club rather than just having it grow in a fairly reactionary way. And by choosing the people fairly deliberately, trying to have the good culture fit and the good social cohesion. And with that design, and particularly one thing comes back to me here is that the club is made to fit the Rotarians, not trying to fit Rotarians into the club. And I think that's one thing that Rotary in the past has done quite a lot of saying, when you join the club, you will X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, X, Y, Z, as opposed to the club kind of being designed in a way that works best for the Rotarians who are a part of it. So that's a really great takeaway from there. So thank you very much. Next, we'll hand over to Don McQueen, who's coming into us from another Rotary E-Club, the Rotary E-Club of Nomads. So Don, we'll pass over to you. Sorry, Don, I think you're on mute still.
Thank you, Stephen. I'm very pleased to be part of this discussion, and I hope that my comments can be of some value to the members listening. Personally, I've been in Rotary for over 25 years and a member of the Nomads Rotary Club for the last 5 years. I was a member of the Rotary Club of Yea in north central Victoria, and we sold our property and moved to Melbourne. I used to travel 42k from where I lived in Strath Creek into Yea every week for Rotary, and then 42k back home again. And some of our members who lived in the town could walk to Rotary. So when I got back to Melbourne, I said, well, I'm not going to go out at night time anymore, but I want to stay in Rotary. What is there? And I looked for a lunch club or a breakfast club near where I now live in Elwood, a suburb in Melbourne, and I couldn't find one. And lo and behold, right at that time, I saw an article in Rotary Down Under about the Nomads Club. And I thought, gee whiz, this sounds just up my alley, because after being locked into a property for a long time, one is limited to one's freedom as far as travelling time is concerned. And my wife and I, we bought a caravan and we haven't looked back since. The Nomads is a remarkable club because we're spread across Australia, and we still meet every Wednesday night, and we've been doing this now for 5 years using Zoom. Now that was before Zoom became the buzzword that it is today. And one of the key points, I think, to the success of the Nomads has been, firstly, we've had one of our members who is extremely tech savvy, and he's been able to educate the other members as they come aboard into the workings of an E-Club, and made it so much easier because we don't lose anyone through people saying, oh, this is just too hard for me. The other great thing that we've done, I think we've rescued a lot of those people, or I shouldn't say a lot, but quite a number of people that Peter mentioned, the 1 in 9 or whatever it was, people leaving their clubs for whatever reason that they chose to. Out of our 55 members, I'm going to guess this, and I'd say about 45 of them have been in Rotary and had some disillusionment of being a member of a normal land-based club. And the Nomads has been able to offer them something different. We travel all over Australia. We have our get-togethers, which we call musters, 2 times a year. We meet online every Wednesday night. We have our members that are in caravans, motorhomes, or just camp. We have all the other activities that a normal Rotary club might have. You know, Days for Girls, our major sponsor, beneficiary, of course, is the Royal Flying Doctor Service. As you can see, is a perfect fit for us travellers. We're great supporters of Shoulder Box, Days for Girls, Angel Gowns, It's in the Bag. And we have a social meeting every second Tuesday where we just get together at 10 o'clock over a cup of tea or a coffee and talk about our day's or our week's activities without any formality and away from any protocol. I don't see it's that complicated. We've got quite an interesting bunch of members and experienced in life and in Rotary, and we get on so well together. And when we have our musters, we can't wait to catch up with one another. We visit each other's homes when we move interstate, and we share so many lovely events. So our district is based in Queensland, because you've got to have a district somewhere, and our district is 9630. We've probably got more members in Queensland than other places. but we work in partnerships with other clubs. And that's how I came to be involved with the cluster of a group of Melbourne clubs near where I live. And that's kept my hand in with service work that otherwise it would have been difficult for me to do. So that's about all I think I can offer. Other than that, we're not a very special club. We're just a bloody good club that enjoys Rotary and enjoys each other's company.
Brilliant, mate. That was spectacular, you said. And I guess some of the really big takeaways from me there, obviously, you know, of course, E-clubs, you know, we're a dime a dozen, we are. One of the big things there, obviously, having, you know, the right level of support there to make that sort of thing happen is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and, you know, more flexibility in service opportunities and particularly capturing ex-Rotarians there, that's a really huge thing. And one of the things that really strikes me there is that even though you're an E-club, there's still a huge emphasis on the social side of things. And
Absolutely.
it's about that social cohesion, that mateship, that fellowship, as we call it in Rotary. And that's really one of the things that binds Rotary together so well. So look, mate, thank you very much. Beautifully said. So been great having you here with us tonight as well. And our final panelist before we kick off with our Q&A session. So if you've got any questions starting to percolate in your brain, feel free to drop them in chat, either in Zoom or on Facebook Live, and we'll get to those soon. So our final speaker for the evening will be Maria Hicks, who's coming to us from the Rotary Passport Club of Melbourne. So thank you, Maria, for joining us, and we'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Steve, and good evening, everybody. The Rotary Passport Club of Melbourne has been chartered for 6 months. There are 42 members at present, and out of the 46, 8 have been involved in Rotary. And I'm not one of them, even though I'm the charter president and the incoming president. So it's a long gig for me at the moment. So 28 out of the 42 members of ours, they work in some capacity for an NGO, either as in-country aid workers or as perhaps a CEO of an Australian or international registered NGO. Our members work and live in Melbourne and the suburbs around Melbourne, Tasmania, Cambodia, Canada, Kenya, Uganda, Vanuatu, and Timor-Leste. Part of that mix, we include 17 honorary members. These are the folks who helped Jenny Foster, who was initially setting up the club, and they came in as, I guess, mentors. And they join us for meetings as well. They're instrumental in chartering the club. Now, our club meets, and it was chartered at the Donation in Kind warehouse at West Footscray, where the volunteers, now it started basically with a group of volunteers, people who did not want to go to meetings and who had other things to do, but many of them enjoyed being of service at the DIK warehouse. And this was virtually like their project. You need to volunteer approximately 30 hours a year, either at DIK if you haven't got anything else, but generally most people work a lot longer hours because they're actually living as a volunteer lifestyle. So it's a non-fundraising club, so we're basically project orientated or project focused, and we're basically a very no-frills organisation. Board meetings have been hybrid to a point where we have met in somebody's place or at the Donation in Kind, and we've had to do a bit of Zooming at the same time because of the location of some of the board members and the incoming board members. Like there's a lady from Albury and another one from one of the outer suburbs, and she works unusual hours. Now, we're not an E-Club because we actually offer one meeting or a meetup. I don't even call it a meeting because a lot of them kind of shy away from that. A meetup at DIK a month. And that's usually a Saturday morning, and it's optional whether or not you attend. Usually the Melbourne and the Tasmanian folks attend this. They meet up, the meetup format is usually a guest speaker with a humanitarian focus, and there's a bit of question discussion time, and if you have any announcements at the end, at the meetup, we would put that out there as well. And if we were meeting at DIK, we would have had a cup of tea and a coffee afterwards. Now, previous to COVID, we only have ever had 2 meetings, and that's the good and the bad of what we're doing at the moment, right? And so what we started doing was we just had the speakers and any important announcements. I recorded them and then uploaded them onto YouTube. But then after 2 meetings, DIK closed and we had to go to Zoom. So I'm not a tech person, but I've got Google, and so I bought a Zoom membership and off we went. So the 3rd month, which was April, I think, our meeting, it was February, March, April. It was business as usual. We did it on the same day, but we had a different time. Now, we used to do it at 10 a.m. in the morning at DIK on a first Saturday, right? But now, I thought, okay, well, we talked about it amongst the board, and so we decided to do it at 4 p.m. because that would involve our Asian members and the South Pacific people too. So we've, given like daylight saving and all, that was like between 2 or less, 3 to 4 hours difference in the timing, and so that gave them an opportunity to just turn up as well. Because previous to that, there was no way. I mean, I know the girl in Canada can't do it, and we just sent her the tapes, recordings, but the others can now. So the Zoom meeting runs virtually the same as what we've always had. We've had the accepted Zoom, and hopefully I do remember to record the meeting. Now, in my case, and as I say to you guys, I'm just new to it all, right? So what I've done is I've got to work the Zoom because I paid for it, conduct the meeting, and and be all over the shop virtually, and I have to really, I want to get someone to chair it as well, and then we've got a new communications public image director, and I'll certainly be working in the future with her to probably tie that up and make it a bit tighter. Excuse me. Future meetings. If we return, So if we return to DIK, we're going to have to, right? Because it's in our bylaws, we're actually going to have, we have that meeting once a month. So we go to DIK, it's very likely, no, it's not likely, it says, yeah, it will be hybrid. Because we're going to try to be in person, because we've got people who joined us who really are not engaging at this point. And there are just a couple of them who really like that DIK experience, but they can't get there because it's been locked up. And so they'll come to the meeting, we'll be there, and while we do that, we will actually Zoom it and record it. Now that's going to mean, here we go, I have to put my hand up here for this one again. I did Google how to use, we need an extra we need to put a camera out there, right? And I think I can do it by actually using my iPhone, and I've got the, what do you call it? A selfie stick like tripod. And if I connect this to my Zoom, I can actually use it as a camera, and I don't need to have what do you call it? Connection. I can't remember now.
You don't need any cable or anything like that.
No, I don't need a cable. And so I can just move it around. So that's going to work, I think. So various time differences and so forth would be okay. So what's the result of the Zoom meetings for us? Bluetooth, that's what I was thinking of. Don't even need that, so we'll be good. So what's the result of Zoom meetings for us for the future? Well, previously, it's interesting, the very first 2 meetings, right, that we had up at DIK in that lunchroom, we had about, I just went and checked the roll call, we had about 18 to 20 people attend. But interesting, out of those 18 to 20 on those 2 occasions, I reckon about 12 were members. And the rest were like some of the mentors. We had Kerry Cornhausen and her husband. So we had a couple of visitors, right? But just think, only 12 to 14 were actual members for those 2 times. Now let's go back to Zoom. So we've had Zoom March, April, May, okay? We've had, the Zoom has resulted in 43 people turning up to the meetings. So the number of members there doubled. In fact, we had a lot of visitors, so there would have been more than 20 members. But yeah, 43 all up, including the mentors, the guests and honorees and so forth. Now, I thought last Saturday, I had to do a club forum. And so that was members only, and that really wasn't appropriate to have the honorees turn up. So out of that, it was interesting, we had 28 turn up for that. So for a new club that's had 2 live meetings and then straight into Zoom in my amateurish fashion, there have been issues that have arisen, and they're probably relevant more to us because of our unique range of member interests, locations, and people have different reasons for joining us. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to sort out the real serious ones who are the NGOs, because a lot of these NGO people, they're with us, they connect with each other, like different groups of like, let's say all the Cambodian NGOs who are part of our group, they've connected with each other. The African section have as well, and they're doing little projects together and funding together and so forth. So there are going to be people that I will never even see, that will, sometimes people just come on to our meetings and you don't see a face, there's a name there, you know that they're part of us, and they're there. So we're still going to carry on as having a the once a month at DIK, and also zooming it out simultaneously. Thanks.
All right.
Thanks, Steve.
Fantastic.
Cool.
No worries. Thank you very much. And there's a lot of interesting things, I guess, being very project oriented. And I guess that focuses on the whole thing of meetings kind of being a way to get projects done rather than meetings existing for their own sake.
Right.
There's a very interesting thing there around, I guess, and I've noticed a lot of conversation in the chat, and this has been awesome to watch as well, is about the Sergeant at Arms role. So speaking as a Sergeant at Arms who basically, I will say right now, I don't do fine sessions, I don't do jokes because no one finds me funny, ever. Much to my regret, maybe. Part of the whole role of the Sergeant at Arms in the past has typically been setting up a physical meeting room, having the badges, having the lectern, having the microphone. Okay, everyone, now sit down. So part of that might now be, for the Sergeant at Arms in the modern world of online meetings, is maybe part of that tech support role. Maybe that becomes part of that role. So there's a bit of an idea. Part of this as well is also this focus on the fact that e-clubs are now becoming a little bit more of a bit of a dying breed in a way. I guess a lot of people have looked at this and said maybe this will need more e-clubs. In my view, if anything, this means that e-clubs are going to become a lot less special because meeting online is now becoming so very normal. So interestingly, more online meetings may mean that there are going to be less e-clubs. So all very interesting points. So look, I'll wrap that up there and say thank you, Maria, for your contributions as well. And so now I'll hand over to one of our past presidents and also our chair of our Peace Committee as well, to Gabe Howe, who will be running our Q&A session. And so just as a reminder for that, if you have any questions, drop them into Zoom, drop them into our Facebook live chat, and we'll run with that. So Gabe.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you to the panelists for the interesting outline of what the clubs do. We have had quite a few questions. The first one we got was about the values from Lynn's club. She has put a link to those values on chat, and I've also put that on the Facebook live comments as well. Next question is from Stephen. The question is to all our panelists. How do you find the mix between physical in-person meetings and virtual meetings online? How do you find the balance? Anyone like to comment?
Yeah,
Yep, Peter?
Yeah, look, I think we've got to be mindful of the purpose of the meeting, you know, and Leon made the point that at least for people joining Rotary, they are often very driven by the projects and whatever. They might still want to have fun, but the time usage is very important. So I think a Zoom meetings or any online meeting is quite efficient for a task-oriented type of thing. It's also useful, as we're having tonight, for information transfer, but it doesn't build the social connections. And so you have to provide another mechanism. Now, for clubs that are able to physically meet, because not all will be, because they're like Don's club or the E-clubs, it's going to be several times a year type of opportunity. They have to then work out for them. But for the average club, I'm hoping we don't go back to the future and just restart up all our face-to-face meetings. I would like to see hybrid meetings become more of the norm, because it's also a measure of inclusion. It allows people who have trouble finding the time or the money to go to physical meetings, allowing them to participate and stay engaged. So I think you need to develop the skills to do hybrid meetings. And I've got a lot of experience in this. They're actually harder again, because exactly as Maria said, you've got a group of people in one place. The others are all tapped in online. The critical thing is to have good audio quality so the people who aren't physically present can hear what's going on. And then the respectful protocols for the people that are in the physical meeting not to dominate, and that requires skills of chairing and so on. And if I could just mention another point, when we run our meetings, we have 3 different roles. We have the club president role, as we've had tonight. We've got a chairperson for the meeting, who is actually the one who liaises with the speaker in their requirements and all aspects. And then we have a host, and the host is not one person, it's a host and a co-host, as you've got tonight. And that's on a rotational roster basis. And those people are the ones, so that you're not stuck like Maria was, trying to do everything. It's very hard to be managing the logistics and so on. So look, it's a learning curve for everybody. There's no right or wrong, and we're all on the same path together. But I would encourage people with traditional clubs to stick with the format and try and get the hybrid meetings going, because I think you'll find that's really valuable in the long term.
Thank you, Peter. Any
Absolutely.
Yep, Lynn?
I'll just add to that. I absolutely agree with Peter around ensuring that there is a purpose to the meeting, and specifically for the demographic that I've been working with, being time poor, it is so important for the meetings to have a reason for being. We're obviously very experimental still. We initially started meeting off once a month, and that was in person at one of our members' boardrooms. And we offered online access to the meeting as well, so through WebEx, and it worked very well because the way the audio was set up in the boardroom, you know, the mic was available to everybody in that setting. The camera would zoom in to the speaker, so it was very high tech setup, and we were fortunate at that point just to be a smaller meeting. So I think the largest meeting that we would have been about 15 to 20 people in that setting. We're obviously hoping to grow, and it's going to be more difficult for the bigger clubs to hold hybrid meetings, particularly if you want to engage people who aren't physically there in person. But a lot of the members did express to me that it was important for us to be meeting physically. And as Peter alluded to, that physical meeting allows the building of rapport, and that the obligation to each other, that respect for each other and respect for each other's work within the club. And post-COVID, we do intend to hold more physical meetings. We're just trying to define exactly how we want our meetings to be. And this is another one of the reasons why we wanted to create a new club structure altogether, that we wouldn't be tied to any particular traditions that people are cringing about that exist in their current clubs. But again, to create something that would be suitable for people from our demographic.
Definitely. And just if I can add one thought to this, with the hybrid meetings, I know this is a very topical point at the moment, and there is, I mean, Maria's pointed out perfectly, there's a lot of technical challenges. And Jenny's also one of our members now, President-elect, has pointed out we've done hybrid events before with our changeovers and our Christmas parties. I guess one thing I would ask is that when we do the feedback and when we post that, if people do have interest in learning more about hybrid meetings, drop a note into the feedback, and maybe we'll look at convening a group to, you know, have a bit of a webinar session or some kind of discussion thing of some sort on hybrid meetings, because that seems to be a very popular topic. So that's it for me. I'll hand back to Gabe.
Thanks, Stephen, and thank you, Lean. That was really interesting to hear different views about. Certainly, I take Peter's point that when you're doing hybrid meetings, there's always a technical issue that you need to be very mindful of, because if you don't do it right, the people who are on technology actually loses the majority of the conversation. So it's really important to be inclusive and make sure that all the participants in the meeting have an equal ability to take part in the meeting. Having said that, though, I just want to point out that when we're talking about hybrid meetings, there are two possibilities. One is hybrid within the meeting. So when you're meeting, some people are meeting in person and others are meeting through technology. And the other type is you're actually meeting sometimes all in person and sometimes all through technology. So there's also another mix of how you can do hybrid meetings. You don't necessarily need to be having technology and in person, same thing. And what works for clubs is really for the clubs to investigate by trial and error or whatever, to find out what fits them best. And talking to other clubs that have had similar experience may be helpful to shortcut some of the testing, but certainly best thing to do is find out what your members, what works for your club. Maria and Don, do you have anything you'd like to add? No? Okay, great.
I just need to ask, I would be very interested in learning on how to operate the hybrid meeting, because we have to be at the donation in kind warehouse, and that in itself creates issues, because you've got people coming and going out of this particular room. So we would have to go to a special room. You know, there's certain things there. If I'm going to have cameras and he's going around, Yeah,
it poses a lot of challenges, definitely. And look, I'm
and it
I'm
always
very
comes back to me, you know. So.
Exactly, and that's part of the challenge. So I think I'm conscious of time, so we'll move on from hybrid meetings, but we'll circle back to that at a later date potentially. So I'll hand back to Gabe now, and he can move along with the questions.
Thanks. So next question is from Richard from Albert Park about that they would like to broadcast live meetings on Zoom when we get back to normal. Whether anybody has any experience doing that, or actually we are.
That's basically a hybrid meeting.
Oh yeah, that is. But and basically we're doing that now as well. Though we are streaming this meeting live through Facebook. But you know, just because you're streaming doesn't mean that you have to be a hybrid meeting as such.
What I'm talking about is when we are back to normal, we have a dinner, we have a speaker, we want to broadcast that so it becomes a hybrid meeting.
Right. Okay. The panel, does anybody want to make any comments?
I'll just make one small comment about meetings that we've had that have been hybrid. It's so important for the technology to be spot on in order to engage the people who aren't physically at the meeting. We've had difficulties in the past with audio not functioning properly. I think hybrid meetings ultimately will work really well if it's set up specifically for one-way interaction. So if there is information being pushed out, that's where hybrid meetings will work really well. And I think the Rotary Club of Melbourne does it really well currently, where they are pushing out information in a digital setting, but I imagine that that's what they would revert to when you know, physical meetings commence again.
Yeah. Right, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Now there was a question about sergeant sessions, and there was a lot of discussion on chat about it, and what a wonderful thing it is. I guess I have a question. My question is, well, when you do sergeant sessions online, how do you collect the money? Anyone?
We've had some clubs who are simply putting their contribution into a box or something at home, and when they all meet together, that's what they'll do. They'll bring the money. But some clubs have found that they've actually banks will take money electronically, unbelievably, and so Rotarians are paying in that way instead of their normal dinner fee. They're making a contribution in that way. But look, I said earlier on, my club abolished completely the role of sergeant over 10 years ago. Quite frankly, we just find it's a total anachronism in modern Rotary, and the whole concept is one that I found to be personally very threatening in some ways, because it was almost bullying from some people. Extremely sexist in some of the remarks that were made, and added nothing to the meeting at all. So I would just encourage you, what's the worst thing that could happen? Abolish the position altogether. We have director of fun, we have quizzes, we have games, we have activities, and we deal with it that way. I know I'm not a panelist, so I'll keep quiet.
Thanks, Darryl. That was great. Wonderful. Anyone else want to add to that?
Well, at the Nomads, we don't have that sort of thing at all. We have more raffles and fundraising activities amongst ourselves to supplement the fundraising activities that we do have, because you can't do it remotely, and we haven't missed it. And I agree with my previous Rotary experience. I used to get so embarrassed about the fine sessions. They were terrible at times, really terrible.
Yeah, I think that there's also the added question that Rotarians are already giving so much of both of their time and the resources, and really fine sessions is just another way of extracting more money from the same people.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's better. better to try to get some money out of other people. Thank you for that. And this is a interesting question from Carol. How do the panelist clubs ensure that individuality is respected?
Mm-hmm.
Carol, do you want to expand on your question? Are you on mute?
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, it took me a moment to unmute, Gabe. Yeah, this is about the basics that everyone's touched on, how a club, for all the other things it does, is just basically a bunch of people relating to one another. In other words, a Rotary club is a set of relationships. If they're good, you generally have a pretty good club. If they're not, then forget the rest, because you're doomed. And a couple, I think that Len touched on it, and maybe a couple of others sort of did as well. But I'm really interested in finding out how the clubs, the various clubs, go about identifying sort of what drives their members and whatever, because it's by doing that and by helping each other to understand those things that we build the relationships that we need, not only to hold together what we've got, but to make it really attractive to other people to join. Because no one wants to join, in this day and age, no one wants to join some formal, high-bound, hierarchical organisation that goes around embarrassing people with fines. Oh, sorry, there are some people who do, but there are a lot who would much rather join something. So really the question is about, how do your clubs respect that individuality? I hope I've worded that properly. Yeah, thanks, Gabe.
All right, thanks. The panel, anyone would like to comment? Peter?
Okay, I'm happy to go first. Just a quick response. I think, again, this is one of those where the electronic doesn't really help us, because it provides a bit of a barrier, because we're not having the side discussions tonight. You know, it's hard for us to do it. We do have the chat, so I shouldn't say we can't do it, but it's a lot more stilted than when we have a traditional face-to-face club meeting where people would socialise in groups. They might have a drink before they're mixing around, then they choose a table. Hopefully they don't all sit down the same places, but that happens a bit. But people get to know one another in those side discussions. And then, of course, the projects that people do, quite often, if they're hands-on, that's where you find out more about people. But some of the traditional things still work, like the behind the badge. We've done quite a few behind the badge scenes, you know, and we also do them not necessarily as self-explanatory. We do it via an interview format where we might have somebody interview and find out more about others. Another one we use is the bulletin. We're using the bulletin quite a bit to ask questions which allow people to give their measured thoughts on, but on a random bunch of questions about them. So the personalities do come out. Some people like using nicknames instead of their name, because it's only a club meeting. Why wouldn't they know you by a nickname? So many different ways that clubs can try and build that. The other thing, we're all talking about Zoom and online. The first thing our club did when we went into lockdown was to set up a phone tree. And when I say a phone tree, that means we're worried about every member, particularly those who are technology challenged. How are they going to be looked after? And who's going to look after, you know, who's going to be their main contact? So in our case, the board actually broke up all the membership and based on natural friendships, so it wasn't sort of artificially allocated. Everybody ended up making phone calls to one another. And for all the high tech in the world, a one-on-one phone call to somebody that you know, maybe unsolicited, under some subterfuge, and you're coming next week, and I haven't seen you last week. That stuff is the most important contact that we can make. And people go, well, Zoom's great because you can see the faces. It helps with visual clues. But if you take that away, pretend you're blind and just talk on the phone for a while, you'll be listening twice as hard, and you'll engage with the person at the other end better, in fact. So I know I worked for the telephone company for a long time, but we used to say that to our call centre operators who couldn't see the person on the other line. They were fantastic for able to listen to audible cues that people will give you just in a word or two that they say, how you're tracking. So I think a lot of that's back to the members to build those personal connections. And it's not really at the meetings, perhaps in the way it was before, but it can be done by calls at any time.
Thanks, Peter. Don, Maria, did you have anything to add?
Well,
thank you.
oh, sorry.
Yeah, basically, because I've only met the Melbourne people twice, so we've actually had most of our members, because they're overseas, they use WhatsApp. We have someone who we usually communicate with them a lot of times at all hours. And when COVID happened, many of our members, of course, stayed on to work, and they were first frontline responders in their own countries. And so all of us have been WhatsApping, Zooming with each other, doing all sorts of, like phone calls and so forth with our overseas members to relate with them and to help them. Some of us, we've done some fundraising on the internet and on Facebook and so on to help them. And we also have our actual meetings, our guest speakers at the moment have always been one of our NGO members. And they've been very interesting as well. And so then the other members, like after they've done a 15-minute, 20-minute presentation, they can have a bit of a, sort of a chat afterwards and questions and so forth. And of course, we also have a bulletin come newsletter that goes out every month as well. And it does actually feature members, their projects, and of course, any district and, international announcements that need to go out.
Yeah. Thanks, Maria.
Brilliant.
Don? Sorry.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that we do very well in our club, I mentioned it in my earlier talk, but it's worth repeating on this subject, is the Tuesday morning informal gatherings that we have. Many of our partners join in, and sometimes that can go for about 2 hours. There's no mention of projects or Rotary protocol. It's just a group of friends over Zoom, may have 25 or 30 in attendance, just chatting like you'd do at a cafe. And it works exceptionally well to keep our hands in with each other on a very personal and friendly basis.
Right. That's great. Thank you. Stephen, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just really quickly, I'm mindful of time, and I know that we have fairly busy panelists, so we've just hit 8 o'clock. We are having quite a bit of discussion, so I'm happy to keep this going for a little while yet. But of course, I know our panelists are quite busy, so if anyone feels that they need to drop off now, by all means, and of course, thank you for your time as well. We will keep the session going a little bit longer, but we might want to try and just keep it a little more to the point. And again, really great discussion so far. And just on that last point, I think it really comes back to that whole thing of having good open communication and trust between the members. So really, really solid discussion. Can I just add
some input to Kero's question? One of the things that we did early on in setting up the club was create a dynamic Google document that had the biography of every single member on it. And initially we thought this was a great idea, and members were writing out, paragraphs of their history and what they'd been up to. And one of our members was reading this document and actually said, if I was a new person reading this document, I would be quite intimidated by this club. So we ended up restructuring that document to asking people just to list a few points of about themselves and what they felt they could offer to the club, what sort of skills. And that's worked really well because, there's photos of people, and there's also ways for people to connect up among themselves if they have projects or issues they want to work on or discuss.
Right. Thank you, Lynn. I would like to actually change the direction a little bit. Rather than answering your questions, I want to ask a question myself. of all the people who are here today, you can see a button that's called reaction at the bottom of the screen. So can I just have a show of if your club, or if you are thinking that after the pandemic, your club should change the way they meet, or you would like the club to change the way you meet, could you then please do a thumbs up? Just trying to see.
Those are quite a few thumbs up. That's pretty good.
Yeah. That's very interesting because, I mean, obviously now a lot more clubs have experienced Zooms and different ways of meeting. So at least the initial learning curve is the barriers a little bit lower than otherwise because you've tried it now. And I think one comment came that one of the old members of one club can't wait to go back to face-to-face meetings. So, you know, technology itself doesn't necessarily solve the problem. And rightly so. I mean, technology, the most important thing, that we don't want to go to technology for its own sake. It has to be something that actually helps you do things better. If it doesn't, you know, just having new technology is not necessarily going to help you. So my next question would then be, what sort of formats are you contemplating if you're thinking of changing? Would you be doing completely online? Would you do a hybrid, as in same meeting, some people meet face-to-face and some technology? Or will you be doing one meeting face-to-face and another technology? Anyone want to offer a view?
I will throw a quick thought in on that, and that's that to Peter's point about the different mediums having different benefits and different values. There is also the possibility, I guess, for clubs, if they're considering it, that they may consider adopting perhaps retaining in-person meetings for their general meetings, but when it comes down to projects, when it comes down to committee meetings, when it comes down to board meetings, things like that, maybe those become things that you do online. And in that case, I guess you have the option to get the most out of certain types of meetings, and the same with the other. A lot of clubs also I know I've talked to have been considering, we want to go back, well, we want to retain doing our general meetings in person, but maybe once a month we want to get together for a face-to-face. And again, as has been mentioned quite a few times by quite a few people, when we do our face-to-face, it is purely social. We do not talk shop. We do not talk business. So interesting thoughts there, and I'll pass over.
Yeah. Anyone else? More chats coming through. Just look. Cost is another thing that we haven't really talked about much. Obviously, it's a lot cheaper for members.
Well, I'd like to tackle that cost one, because I think we talked about 1 in 7 people that leave Rotary every year from every club. It's pretty uniform across Australia and New Zealand, and that's a huge number of people leaving. Cost is a factor. It's not just time, but it's not the cost of the Rotary Club fees or the district fees, although we'd all like those to be lower. That's typically, you know, $300 or something like that. The big cost for the clubs that meet over a meal is the $1,500 or $1,200 a year of meal costs if you attend meetings regularly. And I really would encourage clubs to think about, are they so committed to the venue that they have their meetings at that they can't negotiate to halve that cost and to mix up those meetings and have some non-meal based social meetings, vocational meetings, project meetings, or some other things along those lines that does keep the cost down. Because there are a lot of members who won't give you that reason because they don't want to, you know, embarrass themselves because they can't afford to be in Rotary. But the big cost in Rotary is normally the meals and the drinks, and anyone who doesn't think that, just have a look in your bank statements over the last 12 months.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Bob, if you'll put your hand up.
Yes, look, I really want to support what what we were just hearing. And I think one of the things is the meal costs. The meals generally can be an issue on a lot of levels. I'm aware of some people for whom, in addition to the cost of the meals, and that's a real issue, but also people who have issues with allergies or other medical issues with their diet, or people who have religious issues with their diet. How many conventional Rotary clubs are able to cope with a member who requires a kosher or a halal meal? Very few. I've been a program chair in a club where we've needed to get a kosher or a halal meal for a guest speaker. And that's one reason why I have such a small amount of hair on the top of my head. I was pulling it out in terms of dealing with caterers. But look, to be very personal, I lost 20 kilograms over the last 2 years. I probably a medically supervised diet that would have been undermined had I been interrupting my weight loss campaign for the typical meal in a face-to-face Rotary Club. There's a lot of issues surrounding the weekly club meal, in addition to the obvious one of the costs.
Thanks, Bob. I will also flip this to look at it from the other side, that if you no longer need to pay for meals with your meeting, and you go online for meetings, the amount of money you save could effectively be used for you to become a Port Harris Society member if you donate that money to the foundation, which is actually, basically spending the money that you otherwise would have anyway, and you end up contributing to helping the Rotary cause.
I wonder who's on the district foundation committee here. Wink, wink.
One could also put that money to one's projects, our own club.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Brilliant. We might do one more question and then we'll formally close things off, and people can still hang around and we can all have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, I've got a question from Brian here. The tips for running hybrid meetings, if some people remote, be compiled and distributed. Do you need a conference phone plus a camera phone? Can you do it effectively with just an iPhone? Actually, Stephen, could you make comment on this?
I can. So you can do it effectively with an iPhone. So I won't talk too much about hybrid meetings just now, but one way that we've done it before is we've had, and I looked particularly at our changeover last year for this, where we had a hybrid meeting, of course, is that we would have a TV at the middle of the room, and that would have kind of the gallery Zoom panel on it. And then from that, we had, in this case, me wandering around with my phone, going right up into the faces of speakers, and then we would have the microphone and they'd be able to talk into it. And that would be very good. The problem with that is we had lots of issues with echo. We had lots of issues with audio quality. We had lots of issues with people not being heard. We even had an issue with my phone dying. So all of these things can be mitigated. All of these things can be done. It just takes a matter of time and planning and resources for that. So, but the takeaway from that is that that was something I did with only, I think, only about half an hour's notice or something like that. So at the same time, it can work. Don't be afraid to experiment and try. The worst case is it doesn't work for that meeting and you try something else next time.
Yeah, could I pitch in on that one? In our district, which our district leadership team or district support teams, typically around 30 people, and we have always some people who can't attend. So for 2 years in a row, we ran hybrid district meetings, which gave you probably, would have been along to one or two maybe in various roles. But if not, The main call out I'd like to make there is that you really need to have decent microphones. They're omnidirectional ones, the ones that you see in a conference table in the middle, like Liam was talking about before, because they're sensitive enough. They'll pick up the voices generally. The video is secondary, as I said before. As long as you can hear what people are saying, you can sort of pick up who's by their voice. If you know the people, you'll get that. But look, it's a suck it and see. Every room's different, every budget's different, every club's in a different starting point and has a different range of technical skills available to it. So just be kind to yourself. Like Stephen said, just have a go at it. Low tech to start with, and then work out what you need to do. Don't spend a lot of money on it. But you do, you don't have to go fully professional to have a very successful hybrid meeting. But the main thing is to have somebody who's looking after the welfare of the people who aren't in the room. If the chair isn't doing that, then somebody else needs to be butting in, saying, "Oh, what do you think, Mary or John, who's on the call," and so that they get engaged in the meeting. Otherwise, they're just passively watching what's going on and probably not hearing it very well, and they won't come back again. That's really the experience.
Thank you, Peter. Bruce, you put your hand up. Did you?
Yes, Bruce Anderson, District Governor-elect for 9790. I'd just like to put in the fact that we unfortunately, like many districts, had to cancel our district assembly. And for the last 8 weeks, we have been meeting on Sunday morning, running all of the breakout sessions that would have been run, mostly concurrently, at our district assembly meeting. And I have to say, I hope our district does not revert to doing all of the breakouts concurrently on one day anymore, because our experience over the last 8 weeks with the Zoom meetings that I've been running is that we've had many presidents-elect logging in to every session, and it would have been impossible for them to have done that on the standard breakout session day that we used to operate. So I think the really big thing about the Zoom sessions is the training component. We all accept the fact that there is the need for Rotarians to get together every so often and have fun and fellowship and so on, and that's great. I like the idea of the hybrid meetings for our regular meetings, but in terms of the opportunity that's been presented to us through the coronavirus crisis, the opportunity to train our incoming teams, presidents-elect, everybody else, by Zoom, this has been the biggest win for Rotary that I could imagine.
Thank you, Bruce. Now I'll hand back to Stephen.
All right, brilliant. So we have gone about 15 minutes over time, but I think we've had a lot of really good discussion in that time, and that's fantastic. So what I'll do is I'll do a quick whip around for our panelists, just if they have a couple of closing remarks. So I'll start off with Peter.
Yeah, just a quick one. I'd put in we haven't really had time to talk about it, but as was mentioned on the introduction, we've got a project running to look to redesign Rotary and Rotaract in Australia, New Zealand and the Pacific Islands in Zone 8. This has been approved by the RI board to make a proposal of how we'd operate. We're seeking a lot of consultation, from individual Rotarians around the country. We've got nearly 500 responses in. The survey is still open until Friday this week on the 19th. So if you haven't got a response in, please, do so, or just forward that link. It's just tinyurl.com/Rotary Pilot. That'll take you directly to the survey. And I put it in the chat, so you can just copy and paste from that if you want to fill it in or send it on to anyone. The more people involved, the merrier. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Peter. And Leanne.
Well, it's pretty clear to me that everybody's here because they want their club to be a successful one. You really all believe in the power of Rotary and what Rotary means. My suggestion would be to treat your club, your organisation, as an enterprise that can be successful, and what can lead to success is understanding what your members want. Survey your members, give them the opportunity to contribute to how they want their club to look. Understand what's important to each member, the way they want their meetings to operate. So I know we were talking before earlier about hybrid meetings and digital meetings. They're all just mediums, but if they don't suit what each member wants, then it really is going to lose their engagement. I would say define and redefine your club vision regularly, and what the purpose of your club is, and what the values of your club is regularly. And if you really want to create change in your club and you're finding traditions hard to drop, then frame it a slightly different way. People generally are quite averse to change, but if you sort of instigate experiments, then people are more likely to accept an experiment because it sounds temporary. Experiments can last for years. That's my final 2 cents.
That's brilliantly said. Thank you very much. And Don.
Yeah, well, there's one thing that we haven't discussed tonight, and that is the advent of working together in cooperative clusters. I've seen this working in the cluster that I've become involved with, which widens your horizons away from your own club, and not necessarily too big like a district that can be too big, but just with 10 or a dozen clubs, you broaden your horizons with meeting other Rotarians and working together with them on their projects and even social occasions. And I think that's something that could be pursued.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good point. And I think for a lot of people, what they're finding now is that a lot of people are going to visit other Rotary clubs meetings for the first time. A lot of Rotarians never really see the world beyond their own club. So, and most of us only see it at district conferences or conventions. So this is a really important part as well.
You could use the same analogy for fellowships too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Brilliant. All right, so look, we will wrap it up there. So again, thank you very much to our panelists for all your time tonight, especially given that we've gone over time by quite a lot. And so thank you again to Peter Frew, Leon Trin, Don McQueen, and to Maria Hicks, who's already jumped off the call. So thank you very much to all of you for your time, your expertise, wisdom, and input. It's been fantastic having you. Thank you to everyone from the Rotary E-Club of Melbourne who's made this possible. So obviously we've had Gabe working on our Q&A tonight as our host for that. And so thank you very much, Gabe, for facilitating an awesome discussion, which I think a lot of people enjoyed. And also both Gabe and Jenny, who were instrumental in putting this together by linking us into the right people. So thank you very much for their work on that. And everyone in the E-Club for their thoughts and ideas on putting this whole thing together. And also thank you to our guests. We know this is a Sunday evening and that this is probably not the best time for this type of thing. But at the same time, we felt this would be most accessible for everyone. And hopefully you found something useful out of this and that you've enjoyed it quite immensely. Part of this as well, the survey, like the, not the survey, the recording will be available on our Facebook page. So feel free to jump onto our Facebook page and you'll be able to see the recording on there. And again, this was mentioned by District Governor nominee John from District 9810. And this is, you know, go out there, share the knowledge, share this session with people, and, you know, really take this message and spread it around, because I think we all agree that there are some brilliant things to have had discussed here. And just one more thing on this, for the survey, this is literally the size of the survey. Did you enjoy the event? What did you enjoy, and what would you like to have seen more of? So I'll be dropping that link into the chat right now. Oh, that worked out beautifully. How's that for timing? So, and that brings everything to the evening for an end. Again, we will be leaving the Zoom room open. I will be closing the stream off here. But again, thank you to everyone for coming along. And I guess wrapping this up, this is a really interesting thought which I had earlier, is that this year has been of course, the year of Rotary connecting the world, which it definitely has. And interestingly enough, next year we're going to the year of Rotary opens opportunities. And I think that this meeting is a perfect example that we have exactly the right mindset to accomplish that. So thank you to everyone and have a lovely evening. Good night.